Haidong! In this video, we're going to talk about the fourth Chakgum. As usual, there are going to be a few different variants of this one. So most of these are going to be more stylistic. There's going to be one that's more common, right? But again, there are different ways you can interpret this one, just like how we did with number 3, right? With the cockback, the marionette, and the more standard way of doing things. So this one's also going to have a few different ways you can kind of interpret what this sort of put-away is doing. It's also going to be working on different aspects to kind of make it a little more interesting for you as a practitioner, something that makes it look a little bit more maybe interesting. So let's take a look. Without anything being too fancy just yet, so just so you kind of see what it's looking like, we're going to be switching into a reverse grip. So this is going to be different from what we did from 3, right? Because that is going to be more of a palming kind of motion here. So this one is going to be, again, rolling into a Chakgum, right? This is also going to be true for when you eventually get into 7, right? It's just going to be a little bit shorter than 7, but I'm going through the fingers, right? So the main idea is you're mostly going through, again, these 2 fingers. There are a couple of ways I've kind of heard it happen. So really, really slow, right? So I'm actually going to hobble a little bit closer here. So the idea, right? So if I'm here, kind of like, again, using the momentum of the blade, right? It's going to drop. Again, from here you want to kind of like think about eventually putting the sword between these 2 fingers. Drop. Here, almost like, again, you can almost like palm it this way. And then into reverse. Again. Drop. Again, think about these 2 fingers. As the momentum is coming back up between those 2 fingers, again, so it's almost like your palm is up as you're holding the blade. And you're going to switch. And then as you pinky ring middle, you can also switch this finger back over into reverse grip. Now that's really awkward to go through pretty slow, right? Let's keep going, right? So again, step 1, again between these 2, step 2, and then 3, and then over, repair. Again, drop between these 2, up, over, switch, repair. Now a little bit more momentum is actually going to make it a lot easier, right? So 1, 2. 1, 2. Right? And eventually you can kind of get a nice rhythm of it, so it's no longer right? So eventually you can actually bring it into a nice rolled Chakgum, right? So this is actually kind of nice. This is something that you can practice again with a mukam. You can also practice this with a bunch of different kind of pieces of equipment, right? So like a screamer stick, just say like a drumstick is probably also another thing you can use. So this is very, it's open to a lot of different ways you can practice. Another way that this has been taught, and this was by my instructor, so Master Paul, right? Almost like you're trying to like always point, right? It's almost like you're pointing to the sky as you roll. Right? So this is, again, think about using these 2 fingers, again, point, roll, and away. Point, roll, and away. Make sense? So, again, there are a few different ways you can interpret how to just get that usual roll in. Again, you can practice this, again, just with a mukam, and eventually work your way up to a guard. I know that tends to be kind of annoying for people who are not used to using guards. For things like switching to reverse, things like rolling into reverse, things like eventually doing number 7 back into normal grip. So all of that kind of stuff is going to be a little bit difficult if you're not used to the guard, but I absolutely recommend that you try it with a guard sooner rather than later, right? So for example, when you test for secondary, when you're required to actually use a sword with a metal guard or with a guard, you want to make sure that's not the first time you use a guard, right? So again, I highly recommend you do this ASAP. So again, I recommend having a scabbard and guard even as a white belt, right? So again, just getting used to the momentum. So now let's take a look at, again, a few different ways you can do this. There are going to be 3 ways, again, because my brain likes to work with 3s. There are 3 ways you can think about this, right? So the first way is just having perfect control over your weapon. And what I mean by that is you're just going to be using gravity and your own manipulation of the sword. So here, if I'm focusing, just letting the weight drag it down. So from a standstill, roll into a put away. Right? Again, focus, roll, put away. Again, this is think about where your center of mass is of your sword, right? Feel it drop, right? Feel it drop and curl around your hand, and just roll, right? Now this is a very kind of gentle kind of roll. I like it because it's just elegant, right? Now, that said, this takes a little bit more work, so again, this is probably like maybe the third version that you might want to play with, but just so you kind of know. So this is something, again, you can practice. Now, the other two are a little bit on the easier side in terms of, again, gaining some momentum, right? So the next version is what we call the axe throw, or at least, again, that's how Master Paul called it. Again, the axe throw, because you kind of like chuck it back, and then you kind of go into it. Now, this is the opposite extreme, right? So this is one that's a bit too far. So again, if you do this at a Federation test, fine, right? If you do meow, probably not great, right? Because especially if you're using, an actual metal sword, people might be afraid, right? But again, a little bit back, so maybe not all the way back, a little bit back, get that forward momentum, right? And then roll, right? Back, roll. Back, roll, right? And then go from there. Now the last one is going to be the one that's a little bit more canonical. So again, the first one I did is not anti-canonical. This is a bit too much. So all you're going to do is kind of like the happy medium between the two. So a little bit back, right? So it's not all the way back. A little bit back and then roll, right? So you get a little bit of that momentum going before you actually go into, again, the roll and the put away. Because I didn't actually show the actual put away. Let's also do that, right? So let's actually take a couple from here. So I'm going to break it down from facing you, and then I'm going to show you the actual put away. So from here, again, drop, get between these two fingers, roll up. So again, here, as you can palm up, switch, finger over, back. Drop between these two fingers, up, and then finger. And eventually, roll, roll, roll. So now, you're here, right? Now you actually want to, almost as if you're cutting down through someone's, again, collarbone, down past their floating rib, right? So it's here, cut down, and then a nice, simple reverse grip put away. Now again, I talked about this in terms of Form 3, right? But again, the reason you like to have reverse grip is going to be it's a lot easier to put away longer weapons, but that's actually where we get into an interesting point, right? So would you necessarily do this rolling put away with a longer weapon? Probably not, right? So this is going to be kind of like a little side note, just because it's my own kind of like running theory, is that the actual palto and the chakgums are designed for, again, this length weapon, versus the actual forms themselves were developed for the proper sangsuga, right? But anyway, that's my own individual theory, so let's actually keep going through this, right? Now the draw for was actually pretty straightforward, right? Quite literally. So again, roll here. Again, I like to have it back here so I can really kick it into a cut and then put away. Now obviously, it could be an actual cut. More likely it's just getting that momentum to get the blood away from your hilt, and then here you would actually do the wipe down, right? So cutting down and chuck on. So again, don't forget to engage that left hand as you pull the scabbard back. And that's about it, right? So again, that's kind of like the breakdown of how to do it, right? So again, going through the fingers and also doing, again, the 3 different variations. But we're going to also talk about, again, like what is the purpose of this particular put away, right? So now you might think like, all right, well, we did reverse grip, and which is a little bit iffy just because that's actual release of a weapon. This time you actually have full contact with the weapon. But it's like, all right, why all the spinny bits, right? So why do we do those spins? Now part of it is going to be just showing your ability, right? So this is a nice thing just you have the ability to do. And one thing that you may not initially think, right, so as you do it, is it's actually working on your forearm strength. Again, it's also working on your ability to feel the weight of your sword, right? Because if you just do, cut, put away, you're not really feeling the weight as much. Versus if you're, having the mass of the blade kind of swing around your hand, you're very, very aware of, again, the center of the mass, where the blade is, the orientation of the blade, all that stuff, and all that stuff should be, accounted for whenever you have the blade drawn and, live. But again, so with all that fun stuff, so again, try the 3 variations. Try the 3 variations with different types of swords and different kinds of weights and all that kind of stuff. You can even do this to some extent with a longer, kind of like Joe staff maybe, but you're probably going to scrape the floor after a certain point. But do be careful, right? So especially if you're using a weapon for the first time and you really like that weapon, be careful on the surface that you're practicing because you don't want to drop it. So I guess as usual, right? So keep training. So again, try this out and work on that forearm strength. So keep training, stay safe, and stay humble. Haidong.